Good morning, everybody. This is Amuse News. I'm your host, RJ. We are here with a special guest today, Marisel Salazar. Hi, Marisel. How are you?
Hey RJ, I'm doing great. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining. It was nice. Just as a bit of backstory. Marisel came to an event that we had in New York for HRN, and we started talking, and now we're talking about your debut cookbook, Latin-ish, which comes out on October 20th. It's really it's interesting. There's an interesting story, and I want to talk more about it. And we have lots of big plans to keep talking about it. But I guess first of all, how did you end up at a cookbook at this point?
It's funny. I swore up and down, RJ, that I would never ever write a cookbook unless it was so unique, really added some educational and historical value to the landscape because truth be told, the cookbook market is oversaturated.
Hmm.
Everybody and his or her mom is coming out with a cookbook, and I frankly found them to be quite repetitive. They all started sounding a little bit similar. Oh, here are the recipes that I learned how to cook through my family or learning by my nona's skirts in the cucina. And
Hmm.
it all started to sound the same to me. And I didn't want to be another, just another cookbook on the shelf without actually adding some sort of singular value. And when I recognized the idea for my debut cookbook, Latinish, I knew that it was the only cookbook of its kind. And it's not really based around me, it's based on unifying an entire gastronomy of American cuisine. And nobody was doing that. And I recognized this gap in the culinary education, so to speak. And given also my background, I knew I was the one to fill it. I originally started off as a food and travel writer. Then I came into professional recipe development. I've been a chef's assistant. I've been a cater waiter. I even ran a wholesale granola business, very underground. I've worked in so many different facets of food, but writing and cooking were my two best joys. So when I saw this idea for a cookbook, I knew I had to do it because it was severely lacking, and it's a huge part of American cuisine that's very underserved and under celebrated.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And how was the process for you in terms of just getting to, a cookbook from an idea?
Well, the idea that I had a strong idea. Latinish is all about how Hispanic food has changed, evolved, progressed, and developed and been influenced because of immigration, diaspora, geopolitical events, pop culture, the American influence. And when I had this idea, I to get a little technical about it,
Hmm. Hmm.
I knew that I wanted the best chance of this book getting picked up and sold. So I went online to Googled how do you write a cookbook and get an agent? And I piecemealed together a manuscript. Now, this is so dorky. I'm a writer, so I love writing, but I really love writing long papers, which is a very
Hmm.
archaic
Hmm.
form in this day and age because everybody wants things short.
Yeah.
Uh, I was a researcher in college. I went to Cornell University, so long papers are my jam.
Wow.
And with these manuscripts for a cookbook, you have to write about a 40-page manuscript with sample chapters of your cookbook and marketing plan. So before I even stepped my toe in the waters of looking for a lit agent, I did my best to write a manuscript with everything that I could find online. And then when I put it out there into the world, RJ, my network of writers and food media was just so wonderful and willing to help me because they knew based upon my reputation that I probably had a good idea and it was, maybe something worth listening to.
Yeah.
Kate Headings is a former editor from Food and Wine. We connected, and I have to thank her so much for really just getting everything in motion. We connected. I told her my idea, and she goes, "This has to be told. This story, this type of cuisine needs to be put out there into the world. Let me connect you with my college roommate who was a literary agent." And my second phone call, I hopped onto a call with my now literary agent, Stacy Glick, who's just so wonderful. And midway through me explaining my idea, she cut me off and she says, "I want to sign you."
Wow.
And it seems like it did happen very quickly and overnight, but I've also had 10 years of experience in the industry. So when things seem to happen quickly, like with everybody, it's really because people have been working at it for a long time quietly.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, that it sounds like, and I'm sure that your, relationships and history in the industry helped you. I don't think everyone would have that quick of a path.
Yeah, and I was very fortunate too that my now publisher, Countrymen Press from W. Norton, bought it, as soon as we started pitching it to the market, like 2, 3 months later. So that also signaled to me that there is an appetite for this type of cookbook. And it's because American Latino gastronomy, which is what I talk about in my cookbook, Latinish, has really been underserved. And it touches millions of not just Hispanics in America, but Americans, because it is American cuisine. And we're not talking about it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, makes sense. Wow. Okay. So, so you what did you put into the 40-page? Like, what did you put into that? Like, how much of it is vision and that sort of stuff, and how much of it is actually like, here's a bunch of recipes?
So I think in terms of sample chapters of the rest of recipes, I had maybe 10. And my
Mm-hmm.
cookbook has over 100 recipes. So it was, just a small fraction of it.
Yep.
And it's to demonstrate to the prospective publisher, okay, this is her culinary writing style. This is how I write a head note. Is this recipe sound appealing? And then the majority of it is actually a giant marketing plan, RJ.
Mm. Mm.
I've been having so many conversations with authors and other writers that it's not enough just to be a writer these days. You have to be, RJB, the brand, or
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
the brand. And what can you bring to a prospective publisher out of the box that shows that you can sell cookbooks or your marketing prowess? So a huge part of it was a marketing plan, a lot of my experience, of course, my culinary skills, my writing skills, and then my personal story, because at the end of the day, people are buying cookbooks for the person as well. So my story, my background is extremely colorful. I've lived in so many different countries all around the world. I think maybe 5 different countries, 5 or 6 before I was 20 years old.
Yep.
Uh,
Crazy.
and I've gotten to do a lot of incredible things in my life. So, you really want to put yourself and bring yourself out in these cookbook manuscripts. 40 pages seems like a lot, but man, once you get going, you can really write.
Yeah, that's awesome. What was the how are you differentiating, I guess, is the question.
Differentiating the cookbook or myself?
Yeah, you're building like, what is the brand that you're building?
So my brand, the niche that I've doubled down on, so to speak, is American Latino cuisine.
Mm-hmm.
Sure, I cook and I know about traditional Latin American food. I'm from Panama. My family is from Cuba, half Cuban, half Panamanian, and my grandfather is from Peru. So add the Peruvian in there, and you've got like a Cuban, Panamanian, Peruvian tongue twister.
Mm-hmm.
And I had always been fascinated during my time as a professional recipe developer for magazines about American Latino cuisines, the American influence on Hispanic food and vice versa. And that's really because it's a reflection of myself. I'm a Panamanian immigrant to America. I got my American citizenship when I was 12, 13 years old, but I've grown up half my life on military bases all over the world. And I always like to say that if New York City is a melting pot for all different cultures from around the world, an American military base is a melting pot for every different type of American from the 50 United States. And when I was living on these bases, Americans would, when we get together for dinner parties or potlucks as a kid, would bring a burrito recipe or a taco or, I don't know, a Mexican casserole dish. And they would say, this is a dish from my hometown in the States. This is a dish from, Arizona, from Midwest, Nevada.
Mm-hmm.
And so I always grew up thinking about these specific types of foods as American Latino cuisine. So I recognized it from a very young age. And that's been my niche. I've doubled down and I really wanted to explore and celebrate American Latino cuisines. You know, in America, tacos have become as mainstream as apple pie. Tortillas outsell hamburger buns. Tortilla chips even outsell potato chips. Salsa is just as popular as ketchup. And, you know, Mexican food consistently ranks in the country as one of the top three cuisines. So this, you know, Hispanic food has been embedded in
Yeah.
American cuisine. And I recognize that. And that's really what I'm known for.
Yeah. Yeah. That makes sense. That's great. And so what were some of the, did you, let me figure out how to ask this. How many things did you develop like for the cookbook versus, you know, things that you had been either cooking or had cooked before or, you know, knew about or had in your family? Like how much of it was, I guess, original or
Yeah, net
created
new.
stuff?
I would say a good third, a third to, yeah, a third is net new in terms of just for the cookbook. I created from scratch, like purely my own invention. And
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to like asterisk caveat because the other third, let's say, are recipes I have already developed, you know, and have already been in my arsenal, that I'm bringing into the cookbook and have adapted for the cookbook. And
Mm-hmm.
a huge part of it is since I'm tackling a cuisine, an American gastronomy that has already existed for several or a couple hundreds of years, it's taking those recipes and adapting them to my style for the home cook and not even modernizing it, but I mean, modernizing in the sense of like, okay, this cheese that was used back 200 years ago probably doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm.
Use this American style cheddar or use this cheese from Wisconsin in order to create this dish. And what I mean by dishes that have existed already for a couple hundreds of years, nachos, for examples. Nachos are like, you know, maybe about, I want to say like 80 years old. Uh,
Wow.
it's an old food at this point.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and then foods like certain types of tamales that I have in the cookbook, Delta tamales, you know, tamales from Mississippi, from
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Arkansas, New Orleans hot tamales. These have been around as well. And people don't realize just how old these American Latino cuisines are. And of course, there's a lot of new ones as well because it's constantly evolving and being developed. The movement out in California, for example, is a relatively new subset of American Latino cuisine. It's called Alta California cuisine. And there's this group of wonderful chefs that's really making progress in revolutionizing the idea of Mexican American food in terms of fine dining using heirloom ingredients like heirloom corn from Mexico, or having uni tacos or wagyu burritos or very complicated mole fries that are actually quite beautiful. So it's an ever evolving cuisine,
Mm-hmm.
but it's got some really old roots.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yep. That's awesome. I appreciate all that. And so tell us about, I'm actually really interested in the marketing part. Like, how do you roll out a cookbook effectively, you know, in this day and age when, like you said, it's so saturated?
I'm so glad you asked that because I'm literally in the thick of it as we speak right now. It's what I've been doing every day, all day. As as a cookbook author and as a food writer, you are more and more these days tasked with the responsibility of marketing and promoting your own cookbook. Even 10, 20 years ago, the publisher took a lot of that work off the author's plate, you know. Back when a writer could just be a writer and the marketing and sales and promo team really just handled everything. But to be quite frank, budgets are tighter in the publishing industry. Folks are worried about, you know, taking a chance on a brand new author, so they're hedging their bets.
Mm-hmm.
But it's getting harder to sell cookbook these days. One, because the audience is really saturated. Two, because there is a lot of free content out there online. You could go to a blog from a blogger that you really love. I mean, I know I do. God bless these bloggers that are providing us these free recipes. You could just go onto a blog or something from the New York Times if you have a subscription. There's so much free content for someone to
Yeah.
buy a cookbook, they're really invested in a couple of things. One, the exclusivity of it, the fact that these recipes are not online. Two, the author.
Mm.
How much do they like the author? Do they
Mm-hmm.
know?
Mm-hmm.
Three, the uniqueness of it. In addition to the recipes, what about the head notes and the introduction and all of the education that this cookbook provides that is not online? Four, pretty pictures. A cookbook is a lookbook.
Yeah.
And we eat with our eyes first. So if you want something on your coffee table or to get inspired, does it look amazing?
Yeah.
So I think about those factors, and I had to think about that when doing my cookbook photo shoot. And I'm very fortunate that because of my 10 plus years as a food writer and recipe developer in the industry, I have a lot of connections and have been on television many times before. I do television quite frequently as like a hired gun
Yeah.
for SMT. So I also have that in my arsenal. And really, it's reaching out to editors, telling them about your book, reaching out to podcasters like yourself and chatting. I mean, it is, everything matters. Facebook group book clubs I've been getting into. I'm having a conversation with a wonderful Facebook cookbook group club. Also cookbook clubs, the book talk folks on TikTok, social media influencers. There's so many things for you as an author to think about that you really didn't have to 20 years ago because the landscape was not the same.
Yeah.
And, word of mouth is always great. Utilizing your friends and family to be your marketing army is incredibly helpful.
Right.
So,
That'll never go away, but at
yeah,
the same time, it's not enough.
it's not enough. And I know that sounded like a lot for folks that are listening. It is.
Yeah, well, it's like any content, right? I mean, it's in some ways it's like not surprising, but in other ways it's unfortunate that you can't just like, press a button and have a bunch of people buy your cookbook. You have to actually you have to find people where they are as opposed to people coming to you, through some like mainstream channel and there's only one place to find you, right? It's like
Correct.
every kind of content. It's pretty fascinating. What about events? Like how are you gonna kind of roll out the book in that sense?
I am going on a book tour starting August 20th. We're kicking off here in New York City at Rizzoli Books at 6:30. So it will be the debut cookbook event before I go off to like 8 other cities around the United States to chat with other independent bookstores and on some panels. It's great. My publisher, W.W. Norton Countryman Press, thank God that they helped me with this cookbook tour. I'm so excited about it because it also means I get to meet so many people in real life that I've had these online relationships with, or folks who follow me on social media. And we actually get to meet face to face because I'm going to finally be in their city, and there's something, I can invite a lot of people to. And that is really exciting to me. I'm people talk a lot about, oh, what was it like when you first held your cookbook physically in your hands?
Mm-hmm.
And you see a lot of these folks on social media who are very emotional and sobbing and crying. I mean, I didn't cry or get emotional when I held my cookbook because I've been doing this for the last 2 years. I'm so in the weeds. I think what will make me emotional is when I see other people's reaction to my cookbook, because for them it will be the first time. So
Yeah,
these book tour events are really exciting because I will get to see that.
that's fantastic. Thank you for sharing all that. I guess my last question is just what have you learned?
Oh my gosh. If you want to be a cookbook author, prepare yourself to do a ton of work. It's beyond having a great idea. A great idea is necessary, but start thinking about yourself as a brand, your social media following, your media connections and, how you're able to market yourself. And thank God I'd already done that for myself as a writer. But I will say what producing a cookbook has taught me is that if you are really passionate about something, and I'll end it on my favorite quote in the world, which was given to me by a food critic, Todd Kleiman, back when I was in college. And he was the former food critic of the Washingtonian in DC.
Mm-hmm.
I was on the phone with Todd Kleiman asking him, like, how did you become a food writer? There's no roadmap for this. This is exactly what I want to do. And he said, Marisel, this road is going to be really hard. You're going to get a lot of no's. You're probably not going to make a lot of money. I hope to prove him wrong on that part. He said, what do you do when what you love doesn't love you back? You do it anyways. And I have carried that in my heart every single day as I was becoming a food writer. And I did become a successful food writer. And I feel it again now as I market this cookbook. I can't stop. I have to do the very best that I can with what I have. So it's going to be a grind, y'all. If you're interested in, wanting to create a cookbook, I'm also very open to chatting about people with it one-on-one. So if you DM me on social media at Marisel M. Salazar on Instagram or Threads or TikTok, I'm happy to chat with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you. Thank you for offering that and for taking time and for putting this together. I'm excited to check it out. And I hope to come to the event in New York or maybe one of the other ones. So
yes, I'm sending you an invite, RJ.
Okay. Thank you. All right. Well, have a great day. And thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back later this week.